Welcome back, CSE 235, to exercise 15, which is a continuation of exercise 14, where we'll actually put our results on our web page. I know I kind of teased that in part 2 of ex15, and then we focused on a connection, but now we're actually going to put this information on our web page. And we're only going to focus on this. We're not going to focus on connecting anymore, even though we can do both on the page. We're just going to focus on displaying our information on a page, as long as we already tested that we can connect to it. We can just focus on this. It'll be a lot easier, especially at this point in the semester and dealing with some new content. So basically our finished result here is going to be a table. Now we're going to have a headline here. Spongebob DB results is a headline, H1. Then we're going to have a table. Now a table consists of rows and columns. Now there's 1, 2, 3. It doesn't even matter how many rows we have. It matters that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns right now in our table. Now, rows are going to be created dynamically by a loop, so it doesn't matter how deep they go. It matters that we have 6 across, and we're going to at least create a holders for TD, for cells. TH stands for table header. We're going to have table headers, which are going to be the column headings that are going to show up here. And then we're going to have TD elements, which are table cells. Tabular data is what it stands for, but they're table cells, and we're also going to have 6 going across. 1 for the ID, first name, last name, species, color, age. And then we'll style this later, but that's all we need right now. So we're going to set it up so that we have these things already in place. These will not be in place, but they'll be getting pulled from our database in a loop. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go back to Python Anywhere and see how we're going to set this up. Now again, we're just going to focus on the HTML. We're not going to focus on connecting. So we're just going to focus on displaying this information. So let's go back to Python Anywhere. This is the last thing we did. And I'll close this up right now. And we'll open it up again. And if we go into CSE 235, because we're going to be changing all this, and I don't want us to comment all kinds of stuff out, what I'll do is I'll just make these older files something else. And I already did that with this one. And this is called Flask app.con.py. And what you could do is just go to Flask app and just save as, and just call it Flask app con or call it Flask app 2. I don't care what you save it as, just something different so we don't actually interfere with the original Flask app. So call this one, the one you finished in ex14, called Flask app 2. And I'll just do that. And then I'll go back to CSE 235 and I'm going to go into templates. And I have my index here. Now this is the one we originally did. Now we can just change this one. So I'm not going to have to make a second one for this because we just had a heading, we just had a P. So I'm not going to change this. So we could use the same one here. We don't have to make a second one and, call this index 2 or whatever. I mean, you can, but the only difference is going to be it's going to have maybe a different headline and this thing. So we're going to change this out. So you can use this one. So I'll say we can use that one. So I'll go back to CSE 235. So we're going to be working in Flask app Pi. And you're going to leave this one alone. That was our first one. And I called one connection. You could call it whatever you want. But this is the main one that we're going to be using. Now, we're going to use stuff from main.py, and we're going to put it in here because we're going to get rid of that stuff that originally had all the connection stuff. It'll just be easier not to focus on that for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to main.py. Now, this was the first one that we did, and we actually had it output to the console with a loop at the end. And that wasn't that hard to do. It just put it with line breaks or something like that. So we're going to use all this information. So I'm actually going to copy this. I don't need this 4x in my result, but I'm going to copy this stuff right here. And I'm going to end up putting it in my Flask app Pi. Remember, Flask app 2 you're going to leave alone. That was the one with the connection. So I'm going to copy this from main.py. Even though we have some of that stuff in there, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go back to CSE 235. And I'm going to go back to Flask app, and I'm going to get rid of this whole function. Don't want this right now. At some point, we can do both of this, but I don't want to mess this all up with a lot of different things in here right now. So we're just going to focus on that. We're still going to have app root, and I'm going to get rid of some of this stuff in here because we're not going to do this is connected, but I'm still going to keep app root in here, and I'll still keep this because we may use this. We're still going to render our template. We just won't use message equals message. So we can keep this in here. We can keep the function because that actually creates the index page. And where I'm going to put this stuff, I'll just put it right here. I'll paste this stuff. Now, some of this stuff is going to have to get pulled into our function. That's okay. But this sets up the variable of myDB. Now, you could call it DB, you could call it something else. But this is our connection right here. It's myDB. And then this stuff is going to be in this function. Now, because it's not in a function, we don't have scope issues. So we can have stuff outside of a function and use it in here. Sometimes where you have problems is going from function to function. So we're going to take this stuff, myCursor, which is creating a variable which represents the myCursor object. We're going to take this, and that's part of SQL. So we're going to take this, actually all of these things, we're going to copy these, or just cut them, and put them inside here. I'm going to hit return and paste them here. And I'll kind of backspace everything so they're all kind of lined up and tabbed in because they are in a function. Now, I don't want this color equals gray. I'm just going to put select all from characters. So we see the whole table. Select all from the characters table, and that's what we had initially. Now, we have something here called myCursor. This came from W3 schools. myCursor equals myWB. That my stuff is okay. Now, you could just call this result or something, or results. I'm going to call this results. You don't have to keep that my results. But you can keep this myCursor, and you can keep this one that executes the query here. And then fetch all basically goes through and grabs everything from here and puts it in results. Now we're going to sift through that with a loop. So we're going to sift through the results with a loop, and we're actually going to do that in our index file, and we're going to do it with some embedded Python using that Jinja2 code with the % signs. So I'm going to move this back up here, and that's the way this should look. I have extra space here, and I'll move that up. So app root's correct. That's going to our main page. Def index is fine. We could leave it like that. And myCursor equals mydb.cursor. We're getting all our information from the database. And then finally, this last thing here, this should be results equals results. So we're not using message anymore. We're using results. So we're going to do this first. So that's basically everything that we need from our Flask app.py. And remember, we didn't want to mess with our other ones, so we called that to or connection or whatever. So this is all that we should need here. The only other thing we might need, well, actually, I don't think we have to put it in here. I don't think we have to put our URL for in here. So I'm just going to save this for now, and then we'll focus on our HTML page. And we'll go back to CSE 235. We'll go into templates, because that's where our index file is. And again, we can alter this one. You could even go here if you want to keep this in here for whatever reason and comment it out. That way you didn't lose any information. You could even comment, both of these out if you want to, and just move it over. And then we could just put the table below it if you want. That's fine. That way you didn't lose any code. So I'm going to go under here and I'm going to make a table. Now, instead of typing table code and all that, which is kind of a pain, I'm going to go back to Replit. And here's the stuff I had. I had this file that I just made from Replit with a generic name here. And I'm just going to go in here and I'm going to do table tab and make table tags. And I'll hit return twice. So everything's going inside table. And then, like I said, I have this thing here. I'm going to make a table row that has these cell tags in it. Now, if they're headers, they're called TH. If they're cells, they're called TD. So we're going to do one that has TH and one that has TD. So we're only going to set up 2 rows, and then all the other rows are going to be created by a loop. Let's make our heading. We could call it Spongebob DB results. And then we're actually going to do these rows right here. So to do it in Emmet, to make it a little bit shorter, I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to put TR and then use the greater than sign. And then inside there, I'm going to do TH times 6, because we're going to need 6 of them. And then I'm just going to hit tab. We could put the information in later. We could put placeholders if we want, but I'm just going to hit tab. So I'll do that first. And then after this, I'm going to make another TR and greater than sign and put TD times 6 and hit tab. So that way we have all this kind of holder information here. And I'll backspace here. So we can put stuff in here. So this is fine. We could copy this out of here and use this in Python Anywhere. So I just need the table tags and the TR element, 2 TR elements. with THs in there and TDs in there. These are cells, these are headings. So we're going to copy all that and go back here and put it right here in body. Now we commented out this stuff. So that looks pretty good. Now we're going to put the headings here. This is easy. ID, first name. You could put first name. You could put colons or not colons. I'll put last name because this is the order that we went. And we had species, and then we had color, and then we had age. These are just headings, and they're static. So they're going to be our headings on the first row of our table. And then for the next row of our table, we're actually going to have to do a loop in here. And I'll show you what to do for this loop because we're going to use some of that Jinja 2 code in here. And what we'll do before this table row starts, we're going to loop this. So we're going to do curly brace, %, and then a space, and then %, curly brace. And this is where we're going to put our Python code in here. So we're going to do we're going to do a for loop, and we could just say for row in, and we're going to use results. And because we're in here, we could use that results variable that we actually sent from our Flask py page. So for row in results, and remember how we end this? We do something like this after the tr, and we use the same characters, and I'll just put a space here, and it's just end for together like that, if you remember from the previous Flask exercise that we did. So we're just going to end that there. Now, it doesn't know where to put anything yet, so we have to put stuff in here. So basically what we're going to do is it's kind of like an index. We're actually creating separate lists when we loop to actually create that from our database. So it's actually going through there and creating kind of a list. So we're going to use index numbers from that list. So we're going to do something like this. We're going to use our variable syntax and go in here and do double curly braces. And then inside here, we're going to do row, and then we're going to put row, and then we'll use the index number. It's going to start at 0. So we're going to use the square brackets and put 0, and make sure we put a space. So that will capture the first row of data that it cycles through, the first item in that row. And then we'll go here and we'll just paste all this and we'll change the numbers. Now it's a little confusing because we're saying row, and what it's doing is it's actually getting the elements from the database as they go across. These are the column numbers actually. And we could almost say column here if we're looking at it that way, because really these are the column headings and these are the columns that were coming in here. Now every time we do that, it's going to make a new row. So that's why we're saying row, because we're making new rows. So this is one row that has all the index numbers in that row. It'll have the first one, which is the ID data, then it'll have the first name data, last name data, species data, color data, then age. So this will be the age data here. And as it goes through here until it finds any more, it'll go through our database. So whether you have 8 or 9 or 100 in your database, it'll keep making rows here until it doesn't find any more. And it basically makes a new row in your table once it gets to the last number here. So once it goes through here, it's going to start over again, and it's going to keep going through that data and keep populating rows and hopefully end up something that looks like this. So this will be the first one that it goes through. There's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll keep going through until it doesn't find any more information from that database as it cycles through. So it's not going to cycle through this stuff. That's our heading. It's just going to cycle through this. So let's see how that works. Let's go back and try it out. So let's see what we have here. We have our heading says, oh, we don't have a heading. Let's put a new heading. And we could type this here, H1, and then closing H1. Wait, did it? Oh, it actually did that for me. It made a closing H1. It recognized that. So inside here, I'll just put Spongebob DB results. So Spongebob DB results. And that'll be our heading, and then we'll have a table. No paragraphs, anything like that. No messages about connections or anything like that. And again, the reason we're doing that because we have this message variable in there, and it's a little more complicated. I'd rather just focus on this for now after doing all that other stuff. So we could keep this in here. If we ever want to go back to that, we can, but I'd rather have us focus on actually changing the database if we can. So this is our index file right now, and everything looks okay. We don't have our styles connected yet. We still have that commented out, but let's save it. And let me just go back to CSC 235 and open up the Flask app py. Make sure that looks okay. Make sure I didn't leave in the messed up password or anything like that. So everything looks okay here. We have results that we're using, and it's index.html. So everything looks okay here. I'm going to go back to the web app, and I'm going to reload it first because we made some changes. And then we're going to open it up from here and see how it looks. And there it is. It works. So that wasn't that hard. It was harder to connect to the database and do all that stuff than to do this. This wasn't too bad because we're just doing HTML in here. And again, if you inspect it, you could see that we're just creating a table. There's everything that was created in here. There's our table. There's all our TR tags. And there's the first one. So it's generating this dynamic HTML. There's the ID name, the first name, last name. So it's generating all this stuff in here. So this is front end. So everything we did on the back end is now being shown here in the front end. So users can only see the finished HTML. They can't see what's in the database or anything like that. They could only see what we put in the database. And if we wanted to try something, you could always try this out just for now. We'll go back to, I'll leave this open so that we can reload it. And I'll go to Files and I'll open in a new tab. And I'll go over here and I'll open up Flask app, and I'll see what happens if we change this query. Now, if we go and change this query and put a where clause, and let's just say color equals gray, and I'll use single quotes like we did before, or color equals gray. So this is a specialized query because it should only have like 3 of them in the list. But let's see what happens with the heading since we have all that. I'm not sure if this is going to mess anything up or not, but let's see. Let's just try it out for now. And if not, then we'll go back and we'll focus on styling a little bit. So let's save this. So we're saving our py. We don't have to do anything with our index, I don't believe. But let's see what happens. This could end up well or not well. So I'm going to go back here to my web app and reload it, just because that seems to be the safe thing to do. And I'm going to come here and let's refresh it. And that worked. Now, that only showed 3 rows, and that's fine. Now, we didn't do anything where we didn't show any certain columns, but we can do that as well. But that works okay. So it's only going to generate as much as it finds when it queries through the database. So if it only finds 3, it's only going to loop through and find 3 of these and do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and make those table cells. So these are table headings, these are table cells, TDs that it's doing there. And the last thing we'll do here is we'll make it look nice. So we'll continue with the CSS in part 2.